Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Higher Alignment Podcast. And I am super stoked for today's episode because I have Katarina Polonska on the episode with us today. How are you, Katarina?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. And I had mentioned to Katarina before we got on the episode here that I had polled some of my audience and my clients about different questions. So I know you guys are going to get so much out of today's episode. I'm really excited to just dive right in. But maybe we could start off, Katarina, with just a little bit of your story as far as what got you into this line of work and from a professional standpoint and just what you were going through in your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and keep it brief because
Yeah.
normally when I tell the story, I go on for it for days. Um, Very high level. I have always been the kind of client that I work with now, right? Very classical coaching experience here. Always been a high achiever, very type A. I'm an immigrant so many times over. I was born in Eastern Europe, and my family came over when I was young, when I was like 5 years old. And that immigrant mentality meant that we were working hard, and parents had PhDs, and aiming really high, very high achieving. And I was lucky enough to go to a really good girls' school, had a really great education, but that came with a price, right? As I'm sure you know, and your clients know. And the price that came with for me was that my father always worked abroad. So I grew up having an absent father. My parents were like happily married, quote unquote, very nuclear family, but my father was always working, being the breadwinner, and my mum was also working. So both were pretty absent. And I, like many women, developed anorexia in my teens. And that was kind of my first experience of, okay, there's something going on in my subconscious that's making me unwell. And at the time, I was 16, and my father was really deep into personal growth. Like he was all things Tony Robbins, all things NLP, like he was deep in that world. And again, being Eastern European, I remember when I told my parents, like, I think I have an eating disorder. They didn't know what I was talking about. They were like, what's wrong with you? No, no, you don't. What is that? It's like an American thing. No, you don't. And they kind of very dismissed it. I mean, now I know they're dismissive avoidance parents, right? I did not know that back then, but they dismissed it. And my father's solution to it, when I was like begging and crying for help, was, well, how about I pay for you to do your NLP qualification? You can become an NLP coach and cure yourself, because learn how the subconscious mind works. So that's what he did. And I think it was like 3 weeks off school, pretended I was sick. Sorry, teachers. And I went and I did this retreat where I trained to be an NLP teacher. Sorry, NLP trainer, not trainer, practitioner. And I did my hypnotherapy qualification as well. And again, I was super young. At the time, I think I was the youngest NLP certified coach in England. And I was super young, lots of like older, really interesting people around me. And I will say the NLP did not cure my anorexia, but it did cure my insomnia, because I had really bad insomnia as well. So at that point, I began to understand the power of the subconscious mind. So I managed to get the anorexia kind of under control, went off to university, nearly didn't go, but I went off to university, started a business there as a coach. I was a coach helping students get first class degrees. That was my thing. I actually found my old business card the other day. I was like, wow, very
Love that.
cute. Anyhow, so I did that. And then left university, started another business, this time in the wine industry. So I've always kind of been a bit entrepreneurial. And that's when the family crisis happened. My father left, and we learned that he basically had an affair and he had a whole different family. And it was kind of like the bomb that went off in my family. Like everyone collapsed. My mum collapsed, my brother collapsed. Like I was the quote unquote strong one, right, who kept everything together. I remember having to like mediate a divorce because lawyers would have basically had them kill each other. So I remember being the middleman, kind of playing this sociopathic role when I was like manipulating them both to be kind to each other ultimately. And I was like managing the finances. And at this time, I'm like 23. I'm like really young. And needless to say, I'm living in Spain, running this business, and I had a nervous breakdown. I fully fell apart from all the pressure. At that point, I went and I did the Hoffman process, which, if anyone's ever done the Hoffman process, you'll know why I'm bringing it up. It's like the most powerful transformational retreat I ever did. And that was, again, about patterns and how the brain is wired and how we inherit everything from our parents. So things began to kind of click again. At that point, when I finished the process, I moved to Dubai, and I relapsed into anorexia. So Hoffman process didn't quote unquote cure me, but it was like an insight. And when I relapsed into anorexia again, this time I knew that this is something I really need to get rid of. It's like too big. I felt too old for it, frankly. I was like, I'm in my mid-20s. I mean, do women get anorexia in their mid-20s? I don't know. And that's when I began really studying and kind of beginning to understand more and more about abandonment wounds and how these play out in our lives. I left Dubai, went to Oxford, did my master's degree in gender dynamics, studying masculinity and femininity. Actually, that was like a bid to try and understand myself and try to understand, like, where did anorexia come from? Like, what is femininity? How do women relate to the body? How do women relate to men? And super interesting. And that's when I started really getting coaching and learning about behavioral science and learning about, again, the power of the subconscious mind. And I will say, in 9 months, I actually fully healed from anorexia. So I managed to recondition my brain to not be anorexic, which was incredible. Super, super powerful. I discovered somatic work. I discovered all these brilliant techniques. And so at that point in my life, I was like, I'm pretty good. I'm really healed now, right? I think I was 27 and I was like, I'm healed. I'm good. And I moved to London. Didn't love living in London, and got this job opportunity to move to Vancouver. And that's when I took the opportunity. I loved Vancouver. I'd been to visit before and I thought it's a beautiful place. So I moved out here, working with a local billionaire randomly. I was helping him with an impact investment vehicle, totally different line of work. And I went on to meet my ex-fiance. And this is kind of where the rubber hit the road, right? Because at this point, I'm like, I'm great. I've done all this work on myself. I've had a therapist for 10 years at this point. I know about the subconscious mind. I know all this stuff, and I've healed in so many areas. I have a great relationship with my parents. Like, I'm good. Get into a relationship with my ex-fiance, ex for a reason. And at that point, I was like, wait a second. Why am I feeling so anxious? Why am I, having like heart palpitations when he's not texting me back? I'd been in relationships before, of course, like 3-year relationships and stuff, but this is like a whole nother level. And as our relationship progressed, and it was a lovely relationship, don't get me wrong, it was like a beautiful Instagram perfect relationship. Everything looked great on the surface. Beneath it all, I was a hot mess of anxiety, questioning things, feeling really insecure. And that's what got me down the rabbit hole of looking at attachment theory. And that's when I got down the rabbit hole of recognizing, oh, relational science in behavioral science is very different to any of the personal growth and development that we do. I can do all the personal development in the world. I can do all the meditation. I can have a great healthy body. I can have great finances, great career. I can have all these great things going for me and feel great. But my relationship isn't naturally going to be great itself, because it's a whole different kettle of fish. It's like a whole different thing. And so as I began to learn more about relationships and learn more about dynamics and apply that stuff to myself, the more I realized, actually, I think we're fundamentally incompatible. I actually began to get this clarity that the reason I'm feeling so anxious, the reason all of this stuff's happening, yes, I have anxious attachment, but more than that, I was fundamentally with the wrong person. So long story short, I ended up walking away from that engagement and then kind of vowing to stay single for a while until I really figured out this relationship stuff. And at this point, I was working in behavioral science. I was a vice president for a global behavioral science consultancy. I was knee deep in the world, and I was studying like people dynamics and really just educating myself. I kind of became like a hermit. Like I moved back to the UK, and I was just in my apartment, just studying and doing all the different modalities. And I trained in internal family systems, and I started training in coaching and really training in attachment theory. And then lo and behold, of course, as I mentioned earlier to you, like I met my husband. And this was a very different type of relationship. By this point, I was feeling very secure in myself. I'd obviously understood a lot of relational science, and happy to say the relationship's very different. But that really was the wake-up call to me that we cannot take our relationships for granted. And just because you're doing personal growth in every other arena of your life, you've got your health fixed, you've got a great career, you've got great money, like just because you've done all of that doesn't mean that your relationship's going to be great either. And if your relationship isn't great, that's the foundation. There are tons of studies to show, Harvard being the longest one, the biggest study, that if your relationship, your romantic relationship isn't working out for you, all the other factors in your life are going to be like hindered, right? And if you're not securely attached, you're also going to go on to make less money, be less happy, be less healthy. Like all these factors are all intertwined with your relationships, but actually there's not much good material on relationships. So that's really when I started my business, I really wanted to change that and focus on this area and make it more accessible and understandable, and not be a marriage counselor, even though I do that as well. Trained under the Gottman Institute, but it was more like, how can I work with individuals who are into personal growth, like I have always been, who want to do this work, maybe don't want to bring their partner to it because maybe their partner's not so interested, but help them become better at relationships, because that's going to be the key kind of piece of the puzzle that's going to make the rest of their life so much happier, and their relationship as well. That was still a very long explanation. I'm sorry.
I have as you're talking, I'm like, I have 25 questions I need to ask about all of this. Like, it's just, I love your story so much. And again, so many things firing and wiring right now.
Yeah.
But like, the thing that stands out the most is, with high achievers, most of us are in this constant learning cycle. And like you said, the personal development, we're consuming podcasts, we're reading books, we're doing this training, and it's this constant need to keep learning, which is admirable. Like that's part of what gets you to being successful, however you define that, right? But I also had to learn along my journey that at some point it's like, you got to quit learning and you just got to start integrating. Like, what's the point of all this information? And like, okay, maybe I can rattle it off and I can rattle all these facts off and I know this and I know that, but like, how am I actually integrating it into my life? Am I actually living what I'm learning about, Yeah. And what's fascinating about what you just said is because, this concept of like your personal relationship, your intimate relationship is the foundation of everything else. But when you look at, executives, business owners, etc., whoever's listening, there's a natural drive and ambition to get the business to the next level, to get your career to the next level. But like you said, if you're not taking that same devotion and intention towards your relationship, like it's almost like we have it backwards, where we're truly putting our focus, right? And I just saw a clip from I think it was Alex Hermosi. It was him, who's a big business guru, right? And he was talking about how they did, I might be butchering this a little bit, but with all the companies he owns, they actually did a study on all their executives. And they noticed a correlation between the executives who had supportive partners who were bought into what they did at work. And those executives had a higher performance outcome than the executives who had spouses who weren't really on board, or who guilted them for working too much, or just like weren't bought into like the company mission. Like, and he said they could see such a stark difference in their performance, So it's just so fascinating. And it goes, and it goes back to the simple thing. Like, I know you're from Europe, I'm Canadian, but like, I don't know if you tell me, but I feel like in North America, like this drive to be busy and successful, like it takes such precedence over our relationships, where then we just, I think that's why so many people are miserable out here. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of happy people too, but just the focus is so different,
I'm totally with you on that. I think that kind of Anglo-American culture is that, right? Like you have it in the UK, you have it in Europe, you have it in Eastern Europe, it's everywhere. But I will say, I do often reflect on how grateful I am that I am from Eastern Europe, where things are still a little bit different, right? In the sense that like family comes first, and relationships and love is important. Like there's a kind of a romantic element to it. But it's true. It really is true. Like I will say, because I'm very data driven and I know all my clients are, but I will say, like, I've always been very fortunate, at least from the age of 25 onwards, of earning a good salary, of doing well. I've made more money in my business, which is it started as a passion project, with my husband by my side, than I was when I was, vice president of a global corporation. Like truly. And it goes to show that when we are more connected to a place of our heart, I hate being so woo-woo, but it's true. Being connected to our heart, coming at things from a place of love and joy and pleasure. And the past few years have been pretty hellish for me. They haven't even been that pleasurable and joyful, but my relationship has been really solid, right? My husband and I, we've had the most ridiculous circumstances where we've lived in 2 different countries and we've moved houses like 3 times in 2 years, and it's just been bananas. We've had like grief and deaths in the family and like fertility stuff and all of this, but the relationship itself has been really solid, and our love for each other has been really solid. And more than our love, our commitment to growing together and doing the inner work. And we do it differently, right? I'm knee deep in the world of subconscious blocks and core wounds and attachment theory and all this stuff. He's in a very different world, right? The way he processes information. But the point is, we're both committed to doing it. We're both growing, meaning when things get hard, when things are rocky, when my business was like making no money at the very beginning and I was freaking out about money, because that foundation at home is solid, it meant that I was in this more kind of like heart space place where I'm more open. My nervous system is that little bit more calm. I'm able to take those risks. I'm able to feel safer overall than if I was on my own or unhappy, where I'm more likely to be closed off, kind of being very rational, being very head driven, and making decisions that maybe aren't as bold and audacious as they could be if I didn't feel supported at home. Like, there's very practical realities to this, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you can't be single and successful, but again, like, it does help when you have that connection, when you have someone having your back that loves you and someone that can grow with you, because that's the biggest indicator I found across all relationships. It's not how compatible are we, it's not, do we have the same value system? Like, yeah, to an extent. The real value, the real connecting piece is, are we willing to grow together through thick and thin?
Right.
Because that's
Right.
the thing you really need, right? And I'll never forget, it was my own relationship coach years ago when I was with my ex-fiance, and she was the one who kind of called out like the differences in values. And she painted this picture of what a relationship could be like. And she was talking about parenting and how difficult things can be. And she was like, you want someone who's going to look at you and be like, oh my God, you're looking tired. You're looking tired. Let me go book a workshop for us that can help us figure out how to loosen your workload as you're navigating X, Y, and Z. And we can do it as a couple. Sound good? And I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, I would love to have a man who does that. Right?
Yes.
So it's that growth piece. Yeah.
Right. Oh, again, so many things I could say. Two things. So I want to say one thing, and then I want to come back to that growth piece because that's one of the questions that came up from one of my
Mm.
clients. But I love what you said about like it really does come back to the heart. Like we're humans. That's the center of everything is our heart. And you mentioned earlier studying like masculine and feminine dynamics, and like to me, the feminine is the amplifier. Right. So like, if the whatever the masculine is feeling, either within yourself or if you're referring to a male partner, whatever the case is, like if it's despair, the feminine can amplify it. If it's joy and excitement, the feminine can amplify it. And like, like you said, not that you can't find that within yourself being single, but having that dynamic and having 2 hearts in coherence with that, like it can, I feel like there's no limit to it, right? When
Yeah.
you have it, it's power in numbers, right? The more heart coherence between multiple hearts, it really amplifies your effort. So I really love that you touched on that. But I do want to go back to what you just said about the growth aspect. So you know, what I see with a lot of my clients that I work with is, again, because they're the high achiever, and you just mentioned like sometimes their spouse is in a completely different world, right? And sometimes that's what's great, because you need a little bit of difference in the relationship so that you have something to talk about when you come together. You have someone that maybe challenges your views a little bit, right? It kind of keeps you having to sharpen the sword. However, I have heard and worked through with a few clients where, because they are so conditioned to find a problem and be the problem solver at work, when it comes to dynamics in their relationship, and if maybe there's a challenge, they naturally go to that. And so it's a question of, a how do they find the right balance so they're not the executive in their relationship, right? So what's that? But then also, as you just mentioned, like the key is you ultimately do want a partner who's going to want to grow with you, right? And I'll be honest, I used to, like, if you would ask me 10 years ago, I would have still wanted a male partner that is pushing me to grow, but I looked at it differently. Like before, it would have been like, he's got to be, a top CEO. He's got to be making all this money. He's got to drive this. He's got to look like this, da, 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 da. And I still value those things in a man, but more so for me now, like with my partner now, like he's grounded and he's strong and he's still ambitious, but he's the rock, you know what I mean? And I feel so secure with him. So I guess my question is like, how do you not be the executive in your relationships? Like, what's your advice in that? And then what is your advice on like, when you feel like you're the only one doing the growth? Like, is that, how do you draw that out of them? Or can you not draw that out of your partner?
Yeah, such great questions. Such great questions. So I think with the first one about not being the executive in a relationship, I think there's like a nuance here, right? Because we do want to be leaders. Oh, why is it doing that? We do.
It's okay. It's an exciting question.
Yeah. But we do want to be leaders in the relationship, right? And I'm a big believer that when we can both adopt this idea, and there's a difference between being a leader and an executive, right? When we can adopt the idea that I am 100% responsible for what is going on in the relationship, everything changes. And that's something I really instill into my clients. I understand that, 50-50, but 50-50 has us keeping tabs and has us trying to kind of balance the power, which can work, but ultimately we both bring unique things to the dynamic, right? Again, purely from a gender dynamics perspective, we're going to bring different things to the table. And so I like to think of it as, assume that you have 100% power here, and you are responsible as a leader for what you bring to the table. And actually, you have a lot more control in how the relationship unfolds. As a woman, as a kind of more, and I'm definitely more inclined towards the feminine, right? Even though a lot of my work is so masculine, but the leadership that I'm going to bring there is going to be different to the leadership that my husband will bring. And when we can both show up as leaders who are looking to bring the best of ourselves and to do the best for the relationship, and we're both bringing different roles, because ultimately that is what's going to be happening if you have a relatively balanced relationship. You have a really lovely dynamic because suddenly you stop keeping score, right? I think the difference is when we come in, it's less of a leadership role and more of a, I don't say like micromanager role, but more of this like critical, I'm going to nitpick, I'm going to tell you you're doing this wrong and tell you you're doing that wrong, and I'll make you do this and send you passive aggressive screenshots of Instagram stuff, which is absolutely what I used to do to my poor ex, right? Like poking them and trying to make them better. To me, that's not leadership, right? That's just being a terrible micromanager. And frankly, it's being very critical. And there's a kind of an implicit character assassination going on there where you're telling that person, like, I don't trust you to do your own work. I don't trust you here. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. I think there's something around like, if you're a leader at work, what are the qualities that you're embodying in that leadership aspect? And how would that look like if you were to bring that to your relationship as a leader rather than this like annoying micromanager who's just very critical and actually sucks the confidence out of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To me, the way I'm interpreting it is it's like show up as you want to be the example for, right? Like just be the example. Don't like you say micromanage or go for control. Do you know what I mean, with the passive aggressiveness, but just lead by example. And like again, with any leader, you're not there to force your team to become a certain way. You're just hoping your impact based on how you show up is going to be enough to inspire them to do the same, right?
Precisely.
Right.
And it's hard, right? Like the thing with it's all lovely and easy in theory, but when we're in the relationship and we are triggered and we're through the honeymoon phase where we're deep in power struggle, we're deep in kind of a phase where our wounded inner triggers and inner child is already flaring because we're comfortable, because we fundamentally feel relaxed with this person and we're not putting on our best self. It's hard to want to be the wise, like wonderful leader who's leading them ahead. You're much more likely to be the sulky little brat. Like that is just a reality. And so the homework here is, can you care for your partner's heart, and can you stay upright, like energetically and emotionally, even when you want to go into a state of collapse, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's something around we don't get to take our relationships for granted, because frankly, in this day and age, people can leave at any point and they have every right to leave, right? And so I don't believe in unconditional love in human adult relationships. That seems incredibly unhealthy and toxic to me. It should be conditional, because you don't get to treat someone like your punching bag or have all of your core wounds just like attack this person. You're allowed to get triggered. You're allowed to have your own baggage. You're allowed to have your own stuff that you need to work through in the relationship. But it's your responsibility to work through it, right? It's on you
Right.
to work through it. They're there to be the container to support you, to be the loving, kind of compassionate witness, but it's on you. And so it's also on you to stay upright, to show up as your best self to the best of your ability. I know that's more hard work than I think a lot of people want to do, but to me, that's like the conscious relationship that we're trying to create, rather than the, dysfunctional, like toxic stuff that you see on a lot of TV, which, yeah, that's not healthy love.
Well, and so then my follow-up question to that, I love everything you just said, is like, so how do you know? Like, how do you know when you've you're still working through it and there's some hope at the end of this tunnel, or when you've been like beating a dead horse for a while and it's not making any changes? Let's say you have been leading by example, you've been doing the work, you've been focusing on yourself, you've been, showing up, as you said, as a conscious adult versus the little brat. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've been doing a great job at that. And then maybe your partner is still not quite meeting you where you're at. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sure it's not a blanket answer for
yeah,
everybody, but
yeah.
what is your advice on that? Like,
Mm,
when do you know to be like, okay, I need to choose myself now,
yeah,
like you said? Because the other side of that is, as you mentioned, is there's so many options out there right now, which isn't a good thing necessarily, because when we have too many options, like, humans don't do well with many options. We do better with a couple, and then we pick what's the best. And there's, like you said, not the unconditional love part, but there has to be an element of devotion, in my opinion. Like, I'm committed to loving you. I'm committing to making this work. Of course, I have some deal breakers. I mean, you don't just get to treat me any which way you want. This has to benefit both of us. But like, if I'm choosing to love you, it's a choice every day to do that, to work this out with you, just like it's a choice in business to show up
yeah,
every day, right?
yeah.
But what is your advice for someone when they're at that point and it's like, do I keep going through this, or is it time to like throw in the towel?
Yeah, I love that question. It's such a good question. And I actually think that's probably the question that a lot of my clients come to me with, right? They come to me with this sense of, I need your help to get clarity on, do I stay or do I go? And is it me? Is it them? Is it us? Like, what's the problem here, right? Because they've probably been beating their head against a brick wall. They've probably done marriage counseling. They've probably done therapy, but they're still like, I'm not clear. Is it me? What am I doing here? And so the best bit of advice I ever received on this, and I applied this in my previous relationships, is the more that you can know yourself, the more connected you can become to yourself, the more of a vocabulary that you have with yourself around your needs, your boundaries, your non-negotiables, the more clear you're going to become on how do those shape out in the relationship trajectory. Meaning, if I have boundaries around infidelity, right, which I do, if I have boundaries around my time, right, like for me, going back some years when I was in my early 30s, the boundaries for me were like, if I want to have a family, if I want to have kids, there's some very real biological boundaries here that I have to honor, right? There's a timeline here that I have to kind of adhere to. Equally, again, around infidelity, there was a boundary. I had my own boundaries around growth. I grow pretty quickly. I'm not expecting people to grow at the level I do. I mean, I'm in behavioral science, right? It's my line of work. That being said, I have boundaries around the kind of investment I need to see from a person that feels aligned with the trajectory that I'm on, right? Not saying it has to be the same. I do very different work to what my husband does, but I feel that that growth is, we're kind of equals there. Even if maybe at times I'm growing a little bit faster in some arena, but then he's growing faster in another. So all of that to say, the more that you can know yourself, the more that you know what your needs are, what your boundaries are, the more you can map out your own, literally kind of like boundary driven set of KPIs around what is it that you need to see in the relationship to know that you're being true to yourself, that you're not self-abandoning, right? And normally I will say to clients, like, give it a good 6 months, because that's normally what I will work with them with. A 6-month window, I tell clients to create a contract with yourself based on your needs, based on who you are, and we will figure that out together on here are the different KPIs and metrics I need to see in my partner to know that I'm being true to myself, that I'm not self-abandoning. And then we do a review in 6 months. And I remember I did this with my with my ex-fiance, and when I came to that review period, I was like, yeah, it's not there. Like, this isn't working for me. And that was a very clear bit of information. I'm like, I think we're just two different people, and I think we just need to part ways. There's no kind of bad blood there. It's just like, it's not aligned with who I am and what I need, and probably vice versa. So I think having that knowledge, that granularity about yourself to map out, I'm going to give it 6 months, or I'm going to give it 12 months, whatever it might be. If you have kids, it might be different. Here are the changes I need to see, and here's what I'm going to stick to. It's kind of like a performance plan, right?
Yeah, my audience will like that.
It's a performance plan. Let's call it what it is. Yeah. And like, you don't have to tell your partner. It can be helpful. It can come across as a bit of a threat and ultimatum, right? So I generally tell my clients, you don't have to tell them. What you do owe it to them is you owe it to them to tell them what is it that you need, what is it that you're hoping to get, right? Be clear and transparent with that. You don't need to tell them that, like, I've got some KPIs and you're on a performance plan. Like, that's probably not going to go down well, but be transparent in what it is that you're hoping to see, so they have a fair chance of actually doing it. And be clear at the consequences if you don't get that, right? Totally fair to say, like, look, these things are really important to me, and if I don't see these changes in, an approximate amount of time, then I'm going to have to really question the relationship. Totally fair.
I love that so much. And, I would say, like, for me, again, if you would ask me 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, maybe even 2, honestly, if I could have done that same exercise, and I would have came up, like I said, with a bunch of metrics and this is what I need to see. And okay, cool. But what I realized is I was making that list without getting to know me first, because I have self-abandoned in every relationship I've ever been in, except for the one that I'm currently in now. Like, it's gotten better as I've done the work. It was happening less and less, but it was still happening. And so I would have made this list, and then when they didn't meet the metrics, okay, so the relationship obviously ends for whatever reason, divinely timed, it was supposed to end, because I was making a list that was not even truly in alignment with me, because I didn't know it was in alignment with me because I hadn't spent time with myself. Right. And so I know after my last relationship, I was like, that's when I really realized, like, it's got to be me above all else. Like, I made a pact to myself, no matter how much my business blows up, no matter who Prince Charming walks along, I will never lose the relationship with me first and foremost. Like, my little girl comes first. My inner child comes first, no doubt about it. And like, I just had through all the experiences, realized that if I did that, everything else would fall into line. And then once I really cultivated that relationship with her, now that list made sense. Because now when I wrote out that list of what I needed to see, I actually felt like I could honor it, because I wasn't neglecting her anymore. It wasn't just some like aloof list that I had made. It was like actually based in who I am as a person. So I love that exercise so much, but I just think that we have to make sure that when people are making that list, like, make sure you spend the time getting to know you first, so what's going on that list is genuine, right?
100%. Otherwise, you're not going to abide by it either, right? Like, and 100%. That's why there's no hard and fast rule. I know, again, for me, like, yeah, as a woman, my timeline is probably going to be faster than someone who maybe doesn't have that biological reality. Equally, I work with clients who, they're in their 50s and they have a lot of assets together. And so that's not going to be a 6-month timeline, because the cost of a divorce is like very high, and they're going to fight tooth and claw to avoid that if they can, right? So then it might become a 12-month timeline or an 18-month timeline. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's true for you, to your point. So yeah, really great point. Thanks for adding that.
What's your advice on like communication in the relationship, as far as like, because again, I think people think they can communicate really directly or honestly at work or in business, and there's no they just kind of let things fly. But then when it comes to their personal relationship, obviously, hopefully there's a little bit more consideration. Not that you shouldn't be considerate with your team as well too, but maybe a little bit more of a softening and a little bit more of dialogue back and forth. But
Mhm.
I know for me, for instance, in my last career, I was in a high sales management position, and I was working with all men. So I was very much in my masculine, and that's how I communicated for most of my career till I started to consciously make the shift. And I know that when I came home, when I was dating at that time, I would be meeting my partner or these guys I was dating with that same energy. And of course that throws off the dynamic and the balance, right? So how do you coach people through that, with their communication style transitioning from the business that they're in 10 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day, to now coming home to their partner and having to be more vulnerable and intimate with them to really kind of, cultivate this important relationship we've been talking about?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And something I think I wrote about it on LinkedIn a long time ago, how one of the common fallacies that I hear a lot of is, I have communication training and whatever with HR, and I know all about leadership and communication, therefore I don't need work on my relationship. And I'm like, do you really think that the communication you learn in the corporate space is what you need to an extent? Yeah, the values might be similar, but it's a very different type, right? And it's interesting, as you were saying, I was thinking what I see, and I've fallen victim to this myself. We have our inner gremlins coming out left, right, and center in our relationships, right? When we get to that comfort space, past the honeymoon, where we feel comfortable, we feel relaxed, we feel safe. We're like, who is this, schmuck that I seem to be living with now? We don't talk to them very nicely. I've been guilty of this, absolutely, right? Like, we don't talk to them very nicely. We treat them like crap, and we take them for granted. And so that's kind of where this muscle that we need to build within ourselves of both not taking our partner for granted, not thinking that they're going to hang around and tolerate our, quite frankly, often abusive behavior, and seeing them in their best light, right? There's something around, what you said earlier, that love it's a choice. It's a constant thing that we're having to choose. It's an act, right? It's not just something that you one time happens and then you stay with it. That's such a fairy tale Disney princess myth. It's an ongoing choice. And really every week we're making the decision of like, okay, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to look at this person sleeping next to me who may not look that great, and maybe I'm mad at, and maybe we had a big conflict, but I'm going to choose to love them, and I'm going to choose to see their best qualities. And there's a really lovely analogy. I got it from another relationship coach or a relationship therapist. And the idea is 75% of our thoughts on a daily basis are negative, right? We're so used to having this negative bias, it's survival, that when you think about a relationship, it's almost like as a blank white canvas. And that's the relationship. That's our partner and kind of the dynamic that we have with them. And then there's going to be a few little specks of dirt and maybe mud or whatever that's accumulated over the years. They're the things that we focus on, right? We focus on that. We don't look at the bigger canvas of like, here's this person who I built this life with, who's been there for me, who's stuck with me, who I've had these adventures with, this growth with. So all of that to say, there's a reconditioning that needs to happen where we stop viewing our partners as like this default person who's at home who I'm just going to come home and bark at. And quite frankly, I wouldn't talk to, a child like that. I wouldn't talk to a colleague like that. I wouldn't talk to a friend like that. We're most horrible to the people nearest to us. But begin to get into this mindset of how can I view their greatest qualities? How can I see them for their greatest self? And how can I communicate with them in a way that is considerate, that is compassionate, that is more curious? How can I be interested in it? It's a choice. That love is a choice, right? And when it comes to training that, it's kind of like a yogic pose that we have to learn to hold. I love the work of John Wineland. I've done so much work with him. And he talks a lot about this, how it's like a yoga, it's a practice. You don't get to just kind of roll around in your pants and be a lazy slob with your partner. You can, but you don't want to do that all the time, right? That's not going to be the most healthy, loving relationship. It is a yoga where you learn to show up differently. You learn to have a different tone. You learn to treat them with reverence and with respect and with devotion. Your words earlier, I love that word, right? And that's an intentionality. And it's a muscle. It's literally a muscle. We have to practice it. The same way that it's a muscle that you learn from a very young age and how to behave in the corporate space. Being masculine is a muscle. We learn these things, but we don't get taught them in our relationships. So we default to our like bratty little teenager, which doesn't make a loving, intimate partnership, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and again, what I hear from what you're saying is it goes back to like I would imagine the people who have the biggest challenges making that transition, like practicing that yoga, as you said, is like coming home and being more compassionate, or like
Yeah.
is are probably people who are still, and this is no judgment because I was there, who are still highly wearing that mask all day long. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're at work, you're not connect, you haven't done the work to reconnect with yourself. You're showing up in this performative act, which we've all been there, that there's an element of that in business, but like, it's like when you're so out of tune with yourself all day long. And then when you come home and you feel like it's not even it's probably subconscious that you don't even realize you're just letting yourself go.
Yeah.
It's just like you're just so exhausted and defeated and burnt out that by the time you get home, you
Yeah.
don't even have the
Yeah.
capacity
Yeah.
to view your partner in that way or show up for them in that way, because you've been in survival all day, because you're so
Mm-hmm.
disconnected. And so even if you consciously want to show up for them, this is why it goes back to what you said earlier about like you got to do the work on yourself first.
Yeah.
Like the relationship with yourself has to be number one. Otherwise, you are going to keep living in that polarity of just putting on a performance all day and then just like, kind of be in a puddle at the end of the day. And therefore, the one relationship, as you alluded to, that is the most important partnership in your life. It's not your business partnership. It's not, your team. Like the foundation of all those partnerships is the partnership at home. Right.
Yeah.
But if you can't cultivate and really put intentionality and devotion into it, like it's going to be really hard.
Yeah. 1,000%. And it, again, we live in, I know I have pretty dark views on the state of the world. Like, I really don't think that a lot of the corporate jobs, even a lot of the entrepreneurial jobs, they're not meeting our needs. They're pretty unnatural. They're very against the grain of our kind of authentic heart animal spirit. Like
Mhm.
I think if we really woke up and connected to our true authentic selves, I think we'd all be screaming at the state of the world,
A
right? Like,
1,000%.
and
I
so,
100% agree.
right, and that's like a whole different
Yeah, we could
episode.
talk another 2
I'd
hours
love to
about
talk
that.
about that. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk about that. But what it means is that, to your point, we're performing the whole time. We're wearing a mask. We're having to wear this armor. And yes, your relationship is the one space, maybe family to an extent, but your relationship is the space where you do get to take that armor off and you do get to drop down into your heart and be vulnerable and be softer. That doesn't mean that you're being unkind. It could mean that you're fierce if you're having an argument or there's some kind of passion there. It could mean that you're energized. It could mean that you're standing for a value or something. But it's heart fueled and it's real. It's like, I'm a big believer that when we really drop down into our hearts, we are fundamentally kind, loving people. I think that's the human nature, right? Beneath it all, beneath the wounding, beneath the conditioning, beneath the fears, beneath the anxieties, all loving, kind people. So can we connect with that aspect, right? Which is really, actually, if you think about it, a relaxing of everything else. It's not actually having to put on another mask and another role. It's actually, can I relax so deeply into my nervous system, into my heart, into my body, into the kind of the essence of who I am, that I'm connect back to love and I'm operating from this place of love. Like, I'm a big fan of works like A Course in Miracles, right? And all the stuff about how our essence is love. And to me, it's like the ultimate relaxation. But that is still a muscle. That's still like a yogic practice, right? We don't get to just do that from thin air. And a really lovely kind of 2 practical things I tell clients. It's like, number one, take 20 minutes before you connect with your partner when you get home. Super simple, 10 minutes, whatever time you have. Take that time, go sit yourself down and just go do a heart meditation. I know it sounds woo-woo, but there's science behind it and it works. Sit down, put your hand on your heart, do some breathing, maybe put on one of Kristen Neff's like compassion meditations, whatever works for you, and just connect with your heart. And I love to put my energy, and I do this in conflict as well, put my energy and my attention into my heart and just imagine my heart opening and try interacting with your partner from that place. I have clients who literally will start crying, right? Because they're like, oh, I've had this closed off for so long. And that's where the magic is. That's where your inner kindness, that's where you really get to relax and rejuvenate and replenish. And the relationship becomes this really safe, nourishing space. It's not about like having more armor, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And again, especially with like the kind of personality types we're talking, like pretty much everyone has some type of wall up, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where they've been able to accomplish the things they have in the world, but
Mhm.
being able to let that down and just connect from a human level, like it really is so beautiful. That's a really great practice. So,
Mhm.
I have one more question for you, if that's okay,
Wow.
because I know you have to get going soon. Last one. What is your advice for people setting boundaries in their personal relationships, but in a way where it doesn't now make that relationship feel professional? You know what I mean? And that could be like romantic, but also maybe just like with siblings or a parent, like, people that they want to continue being able to cultivate more vulnerability and intimacy in whatever way. But, if maybe there's been some trauma or some challenges in the past around the relationship, like they still need to uphold some boundaries, but then they don't want it to become, again, like almost like a professional relationship, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Oh, I love that question. Love that question. And I think boundaries are one of the most misunderstood things in relationships, right? A good way of looking at boundaries is a boundary is literally where you as a human being end and another person begins. That's all it is. It's just a preference. It's nothing scary. It's nothing big. It is literally just an indicator of like, this is who I am. This is what I prefer. And here is a bit of an instruction manual on how to love me, right? Because when you love me, then I can love you. And therefore it's nice and easy. That's what a boundary is. So it doesn't have to be something scary. A boundary around, hey, like, I'm giving this relationship 6 months to work. That can feel like a scary big ultimatum. It doesn't have to be. It does depend on how you communicate it. It does depend on the tone that you use. It does depend on the extent to which you are able to communicate that from your heart, right? If you are able to articulate your boundary, which is simply, literally, hey, what I would really need from you is X, Y, and Z. Is that something that you can partner with me on? Simple. If you can communicate that from your heart in a soft way, in a gentle way, in a kind way, and you're asking for consent and partnership, it's pretty kind, right? So a boundary might be, I just had a client now, actually, he was talking about how his wife wants him to cut out a certain family member in his life. And he's like, I don't want to do that. Like, I know they're not perfect, but this is someone important to me. And he's asking, what do I do? And I'm like, it's a boundary. That family member is important to you. Therefore, your love for them makes up part of your identity. Your wife does not get to control that. Now, unless there's abuse, right, literally physical harm, that's a different story. But if it's your wife's preference, that's her own thing to work through. And yeah, it's your job to an extent to help her feel safe, loved, and chosen. And there's probably going to be curiosity and dialogue with her around what is it that you need to feel safe, loved, and chosen. And at the same time, I really need this person in my life. Here is why. And that's it. It's not up for
Right.
debate. It's non negotiable. Obviously, you can escalate the boundary, right? If they're not honoring it, if they're like, disagreeing with it or whatever it might be, if they're violating it, then you might want to put your foot down, firmer tone of voice, and say, like, this is a non negotiable. And if this continues, I'm going to have to remove myself from the situation. So it can get a little bit more forceful. It can still be kind. It can still come from the heart. The heart can be very fierce, and that's okay, right? Think of a mother's love for a child. It is fierce. It's not all soft and fluffy. It can be freaking terrifying, and that's okay. Love is powerful, but it can be kind. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's the key, is what you just said, is like, I think people who struggle to put boundaries in place, which we all do to some extent, I think, depending on the relationship and the dynamic, where we struggle with it is we think that if we set that boundary, it's going to reflect on us poorly. Like either well, then now we're not meeting their needs, or they feel rejected, or whatever the case is. But like you said, if we know that that boundary is based in love, then love is truth, right?
Yeah,
And anything that's done in the truth, like the like, you can't argue with it. And
yeah,
and maybe the other party might not receive it the way you would hope, but then that's something else to explore in the relationship then, right?
yeah,
Because ultimately, if the other party should respect it. And again, if it's based in love, and it's your truth, it doesn't mean it has to be professional. It can still be a very loving personal relationship. It just has to exist in a way that makes you feel safe, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that the final thing I'll say is around boundaries. When we feel a resistance to boundaries, fear, right? Normally the fear is like, this person's going to leave me, I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to be alone, they're going to hate me, they're going to reject me. We can 9 times out of 10 be sure that that is a core wound. It is a subconscious blocker, what I love to work with, that is flaring up. And that's based on a false story from your childhood. So get curious. Where did that belief come from? How old was I when maybe I set a boundary and I got punished for it? You can bet that kids got punished a lot for setting boundaries, right? Like parenting styles back then and even now aren't that great with kids and teaching them boundaries. So of course you're a bit terrified. Your survival depends on it. But that's not the case now, right? So that's where the reparenting work kicks in.
Yeah, it's just the programming, which we all have the option to rewire, which is the beautiful part about that, right?
Exactly.
So I know you have to get going, but this was so incredible. Thank you. I love the insight that you shared. I think everyone's going to get so much information about this. Like I could talk to you for hours. Maybe we'll do it again one day
I
in
was
the
going to
future
say,
here.
like, bring me
Yeah.
back.
We can go through so many angles on just what you touched on today, but thank you so much. Before you go, do you want to just share quickly where people can find you or connect with you? That'd be great.
Absolutely. Well, LinkedIn is a great place to start. I mean, that's where you and I connected, right? So you can find me on LinkedIn, Katarina Polonska. I'm sure you'll type my name out so people can type it in. You can also find me on my website, www.katarinapolonska.com. On there, I've got my masterclass. I've got 2 masterclasses, well worth watching, where I talk a lot about subconscious blockers and core wounds, and I explain a lot how this stuff works. And I give very practical tips on how to both fix your relationship. That's a 20-minute masterclass. And if you're single, find love. That's a 55-minute masterclass, give or take. So definitely check those out. And bring me back. I'd love to come back.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have you. And I'll put those links in the show notes. So if anyone's going to look for it, they can go click and be directed to your work. So thank you so much, Katarina. I appreciate this so much. And yeah, I can't wait to have another conversation in the future.
Amazing.